But I want you to know that based upon the example of the family that I was fortunate enough to marry in on Prince Edward Island, tourism is a business that is, after all, of real consequence to all parts of this region, but it is a tough business. Vehicle traffic on both the Bay Ferries Yarmouth to U.S. and former Scotia Prince cruise has decreased by 72% from 2000 through to 2009, while the cost of operating have increased dramatically. In 2009, Mr. Speaker, just over 1% of visitors to the province used Yarmouth as their entry point. This equates to just over 26,000 people of an estimated cost of over 2 million visitors to Nova Scotia. All important facts that we have to be made aware of. You know, I hear the members opposite saying these facts aren't true. I heard the member from Argyle speak earlier. I didn't see the reliance on any particular specifics at that time. I'm bringing forth some numbers that the department has been brought to my attention. In the past 4 years, the company has had to rely heavily on government subsidies to keep its operation going. This includes over $21 million in subsidies from the province of Nova Scotia in recent years. In my opinion, Mr. Speaker, and in the opinion of this cabinet, this caucus and this government, these subsidies have not helped to make Bay Ferries Yarmouth stronger in the face of growing challenges. In fact, the company's need for government assistance was growing at a time when we were required to make tough decisions that will get Nova Scotia back to balance. Government is working hard to help Southwest Nova Scotia to spur economic activity. I want you to know that the Department of Tourism that I have met with over the last couple of days have clearly pointed out the fact that they are being proactive as they continue to make Southwest Nova Scotia and Destination Southwest an important part of the tourism strategy in this province. Since 2007, the Department of Tourism and Culture has invested almost $400,000 in developing and marketing projects in the Yarmouth and Acadian shores, and it's working with stakeholders to identify strategic options for investments. That plan will help Yarmouth and surrounding municipalities build on their strength and seek new strategic opportunities that enhance their appeal as visitors' destination. Mr. Speaker, this province has a critical economic situation which we are forced to face, and we're going to do that job. In the case of the Bay Ferries Yarmouth to U.S. services, it became clear to us that no amount of government support will make the company financially viable. During the discussions at Cabinet, not to completely blow Cabinet confidentiality, one of the first questions that I, of course, said, I would like to know, where is the government of Maine on this issue? Where is the government of Maine? It was a question that we asked publicly. We discussed it, of course, many times. Where is the governor of Maine? We waited for a number of weeks before we heard back from Governor Baldacci, who said, on behalf of the government of Maine, they cannot help out. They cannot help out. The question of the federal government support has emerged several times since Bay Ferries Yarmouth announced it would no longer operate. And I know that my friend from Shelburne is going to discuss this issue later. The MPs for the area, Mr. Kerr has met with our minister. Mr. Kerr is fully aware of the fact that we were always willing to work with himself or Mr. Keddy at any time. While there have been some recent discussions with the government, it has been made clear to us that no future investments regarding ferry services would be made until the transportation study was completed in the region. Funded by ACOA, this study is guided by a steering committee that involves local businesses and municipal officials from Southwest Nova, together with the provincial departments that we have mentioned: economic and rural development, transportation infrastructure renewal, tourism, culture and heritage. It also involves the federal transport department and representatives from the government of New Brunswick. When we see the results of the transportation study, we hope it will provide answers to key questions about infrastructure needs in the region and help shape potential solutions to the challenges faced there. Mr. Speaker, we're looking forward and working with the people in Southwest Nova to develop a plan for success. Our commitment is to work with the community of Yarmouth and the Southwest region to explore opportunities to drive economic development, to make Southwest Nova the wonderful place that it has been and will continue to be. This commitment was announced in yesterday's speech from the throne read by the Lieutenant Governor. In fact, a team has been established with federal and provincial partners to mobilize and discuss the issues and opportunities facing Southwest Nova Scotia. Provincial tourism staff are part of that team. They've met with officials and stakeholders in the Yarmouth area twice in the past month. They are optimistic, they're working hard together, and they know that Southwest Nova is important to this government. Measures to spur tourism marketing and development in the Yarmouth area are being put together in collaboration with representatives from the region. As this team continues its work, we will see that the area's entrepreneurial spirit and its successes with partnerships will come together to lead the way to renewed opportunity. We want to work with local residents and business. We want to identify strategic initiatives to help strengthen the economy of Southwest Nova, to increase employment opportunities and create a stronger, more sustainable community. Our government is committed to bringing the province back to balance. In some cases, this will require difficult decisions, tough decisions, but at the same time we recognize the vital importance of good jobs, growing the economy. This government has not forgotten Southwest Nova. You are represented in the cabinet and you have a bright future ahead with this government. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. I'll now recognize the Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am pleased to join the debate on this major issue, not only in southwestern Nova Scotia, which is many of the resolutions and the conversations that have happened here today have been talking about southwestern Nova Scotia, but this issue really affects the entire economy of our province, whether you're a tourism operator in Cape Breton or whether you're one in Yarmouth. This ferry, this link, this vital international link affects your business. One of the interesting things is when this government came to power, Nova Scotians were looking for something different. And I believe that. I believe they took them at their word. Well, this decision was very much old-style politics, Mr. Speaker. The community, some of whom are here today, some of the municipal leaders who are here, business community, the Regional Development Authority, kind of came together long before you came to power and recognized there was a transportation issue. And those municipalities said, we need to kind of become masters of our own fate. We need to determine a plan, put together a direction on how we're going to deal not only with the ferry service in Yarmouth, but the fact that the 103, the 101 are not completed yet, to deal with the issue of the Digby ferry, the air service out of Yarmouth, a whole host of transportation issues, and they were building a strategy. And all of a sudden, and that strategy would have been released, Mr. Speaker, will be released this spring. I expect government will probably see it soon. The federal government was part of supporting that. I'm not sure whether the provincial government had put some funding in that, but I believe so. And it was an important first step. It was really a recognition by the men and women on the ground who are being affected by the fact that there was a decline in numbers in tourism, that there was a problem, and how are we going to develop a way to get people in and out and goods and services in and out of our community. And all of a sudden, on December 18th, this government made a decision to really cut the legs out from underneath those organizations and municipalities without any forethought and conversation with them. Mr. Speaker, it is lost on the community why they wouldn't have embraced the initiative that was shown by those municipalities and those business operators and communities and said, finally, a group of people who want a partner, a group of people who have, yes, not said, just send us the money, just keep throwing money after it. We know there's a problem, but we want to try to find a solution. Why didn't they go talk to the federal government for money? The federal government has a responsibility to this link. This is not just the responsibility of the Nova Scotia government or the municipalities in southwestern Nova Scotia. The federal government has a responsibility to keep this transportation link alive and well. I don't think you would find one single person in southwestern Nova Scotia who believes the CAT is the right vessel. I don't believe you'll find one. I know you won't find I can speak for myself. I don't believe it's the right vessel. But what I do believe is that what was being asked for by the community was an investment of $3 million from your government to allow them to reach the next phase of moving this decision forward, to see what the transportation study showed. There are some real challenges, Mr. Speaker. There's a $3 million penalty clause in that contract. We are paying Bay Ferries $3 million to leave the vessel at the dock. I'm not sure why that wasn't brought out sooner than it was. There were people who were, it's pretty obvious they didn't read the contract, but there were also members of the former cabinet who knew that and delayed discussing that. And unfortunately, the municipal leaders who came to this province, came to this city in early December, didn't have all the facts, because they were the ones who didn't get an opportunity to read the contract. Your cabinet did, and the previous cabinet did. So they came here with not all the facts to make a decision to be able to go forward. But now that we know that we're paying Bay Ferries $3 million to stay at the dock, the municipal leaders took leadership and discovered another $3 million to help move this project forward, and we still said no. We know in southwestern Nova Scotia that we don't believe the CAT is the vessel. But once we break that link, once we sever the ties with the tourism operators in the United States, once people start having different migration patterns, how are the communities in southwestern Nova Scotia supposed to believe that they can reconnect in the years ahead and begin to rebuild this vital link? They were looking for a partner, someone who was willing to work with them. Mr. Speaker, one of the real issues that's not being discussed in this whole debate, we're focusing on the CAT, but there's another real issue, and that is that Bay Ferries has a lease on the dock, for a 15-year lease on the dock, and it is a real problem. There is no operator in their right mind that would bring a vessel into Yarmouth and the realization that Bay Ferries is going to own the dock, and Bay Ferries is going to be the one to tell them what they're going to pay to tie up to that boat, to that vessel. What we needed was time. What we needed in southwestern Nova Scotia was time. The people of southwestern Nova Scotia, the people of Yarmouth, the people of Argyll, the people of Clare, the people of Annapolis, Digby Annapolis, the people of Kings West, the people of this province were looking for time. They knew the challenges. They knew they had to return the lease of that dock back to public hands, not to the private interest. Because what has happened when the private interest gained control of that dock? One ferry left town, which meant the only vessel left was the CAT. And they left for the reason because the charges they were being levied on them were too costly. Their competitor controlled how much they were paying to pull their vessel up to the dock. We need to deal with that issue, and we need time, and we need time. The community is working with the federal government to try to find a way to either bring that dock into the hands of private interests or to be able to remove that lease so that we can engage serious business people from around the world and in our communities who want to bring a vessel into Yarmouth to reconnect that link with the kind of vessel that is required to allow us to move forward. It's not an easy issue. It's not an easy issue. But in order for us to be able to do that, we needed time. And as the Minister of Transportation spoke about the amount of investment that is put into Bay Ferries and into this service, there's no question we knew and we know things have to change. Your government and no government should just write checks to be able to keep a service in place when you know there's a problem. But the community wasn't asking for you to write checks for now, for eternity. What they were asking for was for you to write a smaller check than the government has been writing. They're asking for you to do was to work with them to be able to help us to move forward. We subsidize a whole host of things. We subsidize the pork industry because we believed it was important. We subsidize the beef industry because we believe it's important. It is. Why wouldn't we subsidize this vital link for one more year to allow the community to have an opportunity to provide a long-term sustainable solution to this problem? Those are the kinds of questions that the people of southwestern Nova Scotia are looking to be answered. They just wanted more time to be able to provide a viable solution to this challenge. I know that you have tough financial issues in front of you. But I'm going to tell you, if you ask the people of southwestern Nova Scotia, would they rather had $3 million for one more year for Bay Ferries or $40 million to Irving to buy land, they would have suggested you pay $35 million in the land and keep the ferry service alive for one more year. The other piece to this puzzle that's not being debated and talked about enough, in my view, there's 189 direct jobs.
Order, please. The Leader of the Official Opposition has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There's 189 direct jobs. These are families in southwestern Nova Scotia who on December 18th got the news that their job was finished. No warning, no direction, and no hope going forward. Government has at its disposal a whole host of departments and organizations that would be able to help these families in what would be described as a crisis for them. We've described this as a crisis to the economy of Nova Scotia and southwestern Nova Scotia. And indeed, it will have a major impact. But for those 189 families, it is a personal crisis. Many of whom have worked for Bay Ferries for a very long time. Their lifestyle, the way they lived from year to year, was built around their employment at Bay Ferries. And with no warning, their job was finished. And I would ask the government, what have you done to reach out to ensure those families that you understand the challenges that are in front of them and that you are making available every possible tool of your government for future employment, around retraining, around providing them opportunities to be able to create a business in their community, to find new skills, to help them chart a course going forward? Or are we saying to them the only option for them is to take the next car out of town because they can't get the boat and the plane only runs periodically, to take the next car out of town to find a job elsewhere? I don't believe that's the message your government wants to send. I don't believe it's the message that we want to send from this House. If you truly believe that the decision you made around the financial deal with Bay Ferries, well, I think you're wrong. I think you're wrong. I think you had a golden opportunity to show leadership, to develop a partnership with the community, to be able to build on something, to be able to challenge other communities across this province. Don't just come to government looking for money, come to government with a solution. That's what southwestern Nova Scotia was in the process of doing, and you said no thanks, you cut them loose. But if you believe that was the right thing to do, at the very least, you should be reaching out to those men and women who lost their jobs and saying to them, we understand the pain that you're feeling, and we understand the difficulty that you are facing. And here are the options that we have discovered at the disposal of your government. The government that cut your job is now in town to be able to either provide you with new skills to move forward, to provide you with new educational opportunities, the hope of a new job, or the opportunity to create their own employment in their community. That's the only fair thing to do. That's the only compassionate thing to do. if you believe in the decision you have made. Mr. Speaker, I want to finish up by expressing my great appreciation to the municipal leaders in southwestern Nova Scotia and to the business operators there who are being devastated by the fear of what this tourism season is going to bring. The tremendous leadership that they showed, I think, should be applauded and should be replicated across our province. Everyone knows you guys have difficult challenges. Everyone knows the challenges you're faced with financially. This community, this region, understood that. They were charting a course, they were building a plan to come to you with a sustainable, long-term, viable transportation program. And before they could get there, you cut the feet out from underneath them. You need to ask yourself, why would any other region or organization show the leadership that southwestern Nova Scotia did if you're not be willing to listen and partner? It is only fair that you show the people of this province the respect they deserve. When the people of this province are asking for demands too great, you have a right and responsibility to say no. But when the people of this province and the people of southwestern Nova Scotia are asking for your support and your partnership to build a long-term viable solution, you have a responsibility, you have a moral responsibility to reach out, shake their hand, and say we want to partner to find a long-term sustainable transportation system for that part of our province. Mr. Speaker, thank you for allowing me to join in this debate, and I hope someone in this government reaches out to southwestern Nova Scotia with a handshake and say we're prepared to help move forward.
Thank you. I'll now recognize the honourable member for Cape Breton North.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I'm very pleased to stand and rise in the House today for this emergency debate that took a long time coming because the government couldn't find the courage or the fortitude to address the people of Southwest Nova. And thankfully, the government decided to come back to this chamber where we now can address this issue fully. And Mr. Speaker, a tough issue like this, in the short timing, I want to do an introduction, if I can, of some people in the West Gallery that have joined us here today. As you know, we have with us is Ken Winters and Sean Cummings of Bay Ferries. We're very pleased as well to have the Warden of Argyll, Aldrich D'Entremont, with us, who has been a steadfast supporter of Southwest Nova Scotia. And I know we have the Rodneys from Yarmouth that were the best Western operators. And indeed, I'd ask all members of the House to welcome them here today on such short notice. And, Mr. Speaker, I heard some of the drivel coming forward on the floor of the House from the Minister of Transportation Infrastructure Renewal, as the Acting Minister of Tourism, Culture and Heritage, as the Acting Minister of Economic Development, and in terms of dealing with this. So I can tell you, I do believe the Rodneys are here. And they've just closed down Captain Kelly's restaurant as a result of the impact that's being felt in the community and what's happening. So for them to get up and say that there's no impact, for them to get up with their self-righteousness and indignation and say, well, you had to do a business case. Well, they never thought through the real business case. And then they say that they had genuine leadership for today's working families. They've just thrown 500 working families to the curb. That's what the NDP are all about. And not only from one end of Nova Scotia, from Yarmouth, it affects all the way to Cape Breton. And in fact, Mr. Speaker, when you look at the impact on the tourism sector in this province, for them to say this doesn't matter, the percentages of erroneous numbers that were presented, they're not what the community have presented. They're not what people know to be the fact. It's not what the operators throughout this province know to be the beneficial economic impact of the service that is there. They just walked away from all that, Mr. Speaker. And quite frankly, the minister talked about there's been a shift. Indeed, there's been a shift by this government. There's been a shift away from common sense to nonsense, and it's being led by the Premier of this province, and he should be ashamed of what he's doing to the people of Southwest Nova and all across Nova Scotia. So no platitudes today are going to work. They had an opportunity to provide the support that's necessary. They had an opportunity to be genuine. But why should we be surprised by this, Mr. Speaker? We saw what the Minister of Justice and the Cabinet were prepared to do, the people of Cumberland County, and tear away opportunities, see communities that invested in an opportunity and turn their back on them. We've seen that. The Attorney General knows what he's done to working families in Cumberland County and people of that area. We've seen the impact of this government and the negative impact of a socialist government. You know, and Chairman Dexter can put on a smile all he wants, but he won't go down and see the people in Southwest Nova. He can sit in the gallery and talk to a couple of folks. That's great courage. He doesn't have the courage to go face the people. And Mr. Speaker, I know he doesn't have the intestinal fortitude to call a by-election. He can use any excuse he wants, but they can't go to the people because they know the people have the ultimate voice in democracy. The people will vote with their voice. And I'll tell you, the NDP never need to worry about putting a candidate on a ballot anytime soon in Southwest Nova. You know, Mr. Speaker, the Premier of Nova Scotia himself, the Premier, in talking about, I heard the minister say, well, the investment is not there, the appropriateness. You know, we had to look at the numbers, we had to look at the feasibility. We agree with the Leader of the Liberal Party. The community understood that the CAT was not the appropriate vessel. That's why the Government of Canada invested $1 million into the transportation strategy for Southwest Nova, recognizing that, indeed, there had to be a long-term strategy and plan. But in the short term, there had to be a need to continue with jobs. And for them to say, oh, it's not a big deal, it's only a portal. Well, I can tell you, I'm speaking as a member from Cape Breton in this House, and I hope that the members of governments that are from Cape Breton will also support the tourism sector. 40% of the Cape Breton Resorts traffic came through the CAT service through the port through Yarmouth. That is a reality. 40%. Operators in Cape Breton are being affected and negatively affected, just like the Rodneys are, all around them. And they know from their colleagues, they know from the citizens in the community that are being negatively affected by this. And you know, and then they say, oh, we didn't know there was a $3 million clause. Well, I know the former member for there had pointed that out, had told them that in meetings. Well, what's interesting, Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Transportation Infrastructure, you know, the whole Cabinet, including the Premier, said they thought this through, but they didn't even read the agreement to begin with because they would have known it was in there in black ink on white paper telling them what the clause was if you moved out. And then they say, well, that's off $3 million. Well, now you know why there was that clause. The fear of the likes of the NDP coming and wreaking economic havoc around this province on working families. That's the reality of what they've done. And Mr. Speaker, the Premier of the province of Nova Scotia is quoted, and I'll table this from the Halifax Herald, is quoted about convention centres. He says, convention centres, they don't carry themselves in any jurisdiction, so as far as I know, the question is one of economic benefit that comes from having them there. Oh, well, let's talk about convention centres. But then again, that's an issue because apparently he's going to abandon the people of Halifax the same way he's abandoned the people of Cumberland County, abandoning the people of Southwest Nova. I'll table that, Mr. Speaker. The Premier has one case to try and make a model. If he applied that same principle to the ferry service for Yarmouth and Southwest Nova, indeed, there would be a case because it's what that service brings to the wider economy of this province. And the community down there knew that things had to move forward. The community understood the challenges before the government and indeed that we had to make some changes. And Mr. Speaker, I can tell you that for this lot that would claim to be the voice of the people, well, all they have done, Mr. Speaker, and I know I'm glad the Minister of Transportation spoke, because maybe you can erect a new sign down there, Minister, because the new sign is going to be closed to the lack of interest by the NDP. Because you put the locks on opportunity. And instead of recognizing the $6 million as a bridge opportunity to the future. And I can speak on the operators, the tourism operators of Cape Breton, that recognize the fact that the government sunk the ferry and that they sunk the people of Southwest Nova, they hurt tourism opportunities around the province. Because while they'll now say, well, we'll work towards the future, we'll look at that. The reality is, by discontinuing the service for an operating season, the cost of renewing that, doing the marketing and trying to get the people back in that area is lost. And instead of doing, and even when the community, Mr. Speaker, stepped up to the plate, the municipalities, and to their credit, showed the leadership of willing to put an investment in of what they could afford, which is far less than what this government did with all of deficit Darrell's spending that he's had in this last little while, Mr. Speaker. They can deficit spend on land, but they won't spend on people and invest in people. in the very core of what this is all about, Mr. Speaker, because it's people that are negatively affected by the New Democratic Party of Nova Scotia, by the NDP government, by socialists that talk one thing out in their statements and do another. And we've heard in the speech from the throne yesterday, egalitarian. I heard in the response from the member from Lunenburg West. We're an egalitarian. You know, we're out there. Well, if you were thinking about the people, you'd make the right investments in the people of the area, which they have refused to do. And it's despicable that they would do it. And, Mr. Speaker, but they were prepared, and I'm glad to see the Minister of Fisheries is looking like he's getting ready to speak next, and I know he'll take accolades for bringing some shipbuilding jobs. $8.7 million for Irving Shipbuilding, and great for that opportunity. $6 million of it forgivable for 50 jobs. And $6 million that they were prepared to walk away from for over 500 jobs in the economic integrity of the tourism sector of this province. And I say to that minister, as a member from that area, as a regional minister, how can you go into the people of your area? How can you represent the issues of the people of your area when you're prepared to come to Halifax, sit at a cabinet table, and write them all off and set them adrift?
He didn't know it was an issue. He didn't know.
He claimed it wasn't an issue. The Minister of Economic Development said, oh, I didn't realize the impact of this. He's the Minister of Tourism, Culture and Heritage at the same time. Who's telling who what in this NDP socialist regime led by, the deficit Darrell of the province? Chairman Dexter can say whatever he wants, but he's not representing the real interests of the people of Nova Scotia. And I'll tell you, Mr. Speaker, we had to call an emergency debate because they would not go to the people of Southwest Nova. Thankfully, some of the people from Southwest Nova have come to this House, like they did in February, and came outside of this building. And again, how many members of the government, Mr. Speaker, were there to address the hundreds that rallied here? None. They couldn't do it. Where was the Premier? Well, I tell the Premier, it's supposed to be a Nova Scotia first, not an executive first policy. I heard, Mr. Speaker, about all the things they want to do, the Caribbean, they want to go over to Vietnam and all these places. Well, we just found out the government's, and through the speech from the throne, their travel plans for the next several months, because that's exactly what they're doing. They're going out and trying to put these platitudes to say that they're doing things to grow the economy of Nova Scotia. And at the same time, they've sunk the economy of Southwest Nova. And that's a disgrace, and they should be ashamed of that, Mr. Speaker, for what they've done to the people there.
By-election, they'll have to show up.
Well, in a by-election, they actually might show up. They might try and show up, and put a few million in like they've done in Antigonish in the throes of a campaign to try and make things look good. Well, maybe it's a library, but it isn't about the jobs that are there, that should be there, that they abandoned. And there's nothing they can say in the speech from the throne, because it all rings hollow in these halls today. It rings hollow because they don't have the depth or the capacity or ability to represent the real issues of working women and men in this province and who care for their families. Because I know the Minister of Transportation Infrastructure Renewal, when he was in the opposition, wouldn't have had a scripted speech. And if 500 people from his area were thrown to the curb, he'd have something else to say in this chamber. And every one of us know that. He knows that. He knows that. And he knows that what they've done is fundamentally wrong. And it is wrong. Because what has happened is the Premier and the NDP cabinet and the NDP caucus have betrayed the people of Southwest Nova.
All Nova Scotia.
They have not done what they should do and what they say in all their pamphlets. They say that they will do all these things. Well, I know, Mr. Speaker, there's a very disturbing trend. And part of the disturbing trend is the attack on rural Nova Scotia by this Metro-led cabinet in the NDP government. The attack on rural Nova Scotia is disturbing, to say the least. And the member from the region, the regional minister, will not stand up for and with the people from the region, thus the reason for us to have an emergency debate in this chamber today. Because he's failed the people does not mean the progressive Conservatives who are happy to invest $18 million have been invested since 1997 in that service. And when you look at a $175 million return, and then you tell me that the economics aren't there, when you look at the families that have benefited and the tourism operators that have benefited and the international travelers that have benefited from the Nova Scotia experience,
Their families.
and we look at this, then it's not, the business case isn't there. Well, Mr. Speaker, I know the next thing, and I'm glad today they were willing and to take a chance in saying they support the rail service in Cape Breton. Because I can tell you, if that's another attack in this province, there'll be many demonstrations, there'll be lots of emergency debates going on. This government is now in session. We should be here as long as we have to be, and we'll do everything we have to for the people of Nova Scotia. And while the Attorney General dismisses the people and doesn't take seriously anything with his foolish gestures over there, Mr. Speaker, the people of Southwest Nova care. The people of Southwest Nova care. Because the people of Cumberland County and Spring Hill know the Attorney General has written them off. He doesn't believe in them. He doesn't believe in the professional work they do. He doesn't believe in the communities. The Minister of Service Nova Scotia Municipal Relations doesn't want to meet with municipal councils that actually have invested. Just like the municipal councils have in Yarmouth County, we're prepared to invest in their community. The community of Spring Hill was investing in that new correctional centre, put over $1 million in the planning for that and everything else. And you know what? I want to see when the legal case is brought forward in terms of this government breaking the trust and the fundamental trust that was given to them to form a government. Because, Mr. Speaker, in their platform document, they said lots of things. And I'll tell you, they've got a broken record on broken promises, and they're breaking the backs of working families around this province. That's the reality of what's going on. And I would hope that the Minister of Fisheries will stand and say what he is going to do. Has he spoken up? He hasn't said a word for or about the working families of Southwest Nova and Yarmouth County. He hasn't spoken about the businesses in there. And I can tell you, I know what it's like to have been a regional minister, and I would never turn my back like you have, Minister, on the people of my region when it comes to the economic integrity of that region and the needs of that region. And recognizing in Cape Breton, the investment in the railway was about a bridge to the future and the commercialization of the port. Well, I'll tell you, the Port of North Sydney, which has Marine Atlantic, the business case will never be there to have that operate without government support. And the people of Southwest Nova have a vital link through the ferry service there, and the economic spin-off from that is huge, far greater than anything else there. And Mr. Speaker, I hope this debate is not too late for this government to start getting common sense and get away from the nonsense they've been inflicting on the people of this province.
Thank you, member. I'll now recognize the Honourable Minister of Fisheries.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker and honourable members. And I'm very pleased to be included in this particular debate today on this particular decision. And I just, as I listened to the debate here over the last few minutes, I was reflected upon my previous career, Mr. Speaker, and I spent a number of years, decades on the water. And I know sometimes we have difficult decisions to make. And you always want to be reassured, Mr. Speaker, that you have the right captain, that you're going to make the right decisions at difficult times. And I can assure the members opposite and the members of the residents of Nova Scotia that we have the right leader, and our leader is going to make the right decisions for Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, I listened with great interest, and I know that everybody in this House, we are privileged here that we have an opportunity to, present our opinions. But we're entitled to hear the facts. And I want to just lay out some of the investments that we have done, this government, in the last 9 months for Nova Scotia, particularly Southwest Nova Scotia. And I will.
Order, please. Previous members were given the respect of the House. I'd ask that you give the same respect to the Minister. The Minister of Fisheries.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm talking about sustainable jobs, and I want to lay out a couple of scenarios here in the next 3 minutes. And I want to start off with Yarmouth, particularly the Tuscan area. And this government has invested in JH Fisheries, which is a salt fish processing company. There's a number of jobs, and I want to point out that this particular scenario about taking waste products, fish waste, and utilizing them and creating a product, and also bringing in 60% of that product from the local area, and also including in transportation of outside provinces, New England and other provinces, 40% of that product is being transported to Southwest Nova Scotia. I also want to point out, and some of the members opposite talked about the Shelburne shipyards. Shelburne Shipyards, Mr. Speaker, was an investment by this government in the last few months. And I also want to point out that that facility has been there since the turn of World War II. This particular government invested in them jobs. anywhere between 50 and 70 of good, high-paying, skilled jobs that the members opposite, both parties, had an opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to invest in that over a number of years, and they failed. They failed the people of southwest Nova Scotia. They failed the people of Nova Scotia to invest in good jobs. One of the best harbors around the world is in Shelburne. And what may have overlooked is that also in my community, Bayside Homes, that is being built as we speak. As we speak. Well, I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, that who didn't start it, the members,
Order. Does the member from Argyle have a point? You have a point of order?
I have a point of personal privilege. You don't know what that is.
Then proceed. The honourable member for Argyle.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And the member opposite knows full well that it was our government and this minister that got Bayside started. Mr. Speaker, if he wants to finish it, that is fine. If this minister wants to finish it, that is fine. But this minister, when I was a minister, because he's lying to people.
Honourable member, that language is not acceptable here in this House. You know that. I know that. All the members of this House know that.
Mr. Speaker,
I'll ask you to retract that.
I'll retract that. But the member opposite knows full well that it was our government that started Bayside, even with all the things. So, Mr. Speaker, that's my privilege to stand here and say that, Mr. Speaker. And if he wants to retract that, I'd accept that apology as well.
Thank you, member. The Honourable Minister of Fisheries.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Again, I look forward to the debate, and I know that some of the members opposite, there's some sensitivity around the wording here. But I also want to bring you back to Bayside Home. And one of my very first speaking engagement in this House, that I tabled the tenders and the blueprints for Bayside Home. The members opposite, both parties, had 30 years, over 30 years to deal with that, and they failed. And I want to assure you, there was also highlighted that people in southwest Nova Scotia may want to be interested in having an NDP member on their ballot. The three scenarios I just pointed out earlier, I can assure you that they're very pleased that an NDP member is on that ballot, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, one of these things I want to talk about here in the next few minutes is a member from Argyle in the most recent newspaper article of Sunday, March the 21st, 2010, and I quote the member from Argyle, "We want to find out how much work the province, the NDP government, has actually done with Ottawa. They have taken the effort to meet with the federal MPs, the federal minister, and what we're finding overall is that there has been no contact with the federal government," he said, "other than a meeting between the Premier and the Prime Minister a few weeks ago." Well, Mr. Speaker, I want to point out clearly that people in this House are entitled to their opinion, but they are not entitled to their facts. The facts are, Mr. Speaker, the facts are that this particular government has talked with Maine, the U.S. government, the federal government, and they did not want to come to this table. And not one penny was forthcoming from them two governments. I also want to point out, Mr. Speaker, that I have met with the mayors and wardens of the Tri-County.
Order, please. Again, you know, respect was given to each member when they got up to speak on present their arguments, their facts, their information, and I would ask that we give the same respect to the member that's presently speaking. The Honourable Minister of Fisheries.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Again, I want to talk about the decision about the cat and this particular decision, and the member opposites talked about that all trade is going to be broke off from southwest Nova Scotia and particularly southwest Nova Scotia. I also want to point out, Mr. Speaker, I had the pleasure of being in Boston just a few weeks ago, and I want to tell you that the trade is not broken off from southwest Nova Scotia or Nova Scotia. The trade is one of the highest levels that we've seen in recent years, and it's very interesting to note, Mr. Speaker, that a lot of the members here, they do not fail to mention that the cat did not include any commercial traffic from our fishing industry or our forestry or other primary resources. That is an integral part of any ferry system, and the CAT did not deliver that.
Order. Again, if a member has a question they want to address to the chair, I'd appreciate it that way, not directly to the minister. The Honourable Minister of Fisheries.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, Mr. Speaker, I want to point out that I met several times with the mayors and wardens from the tri-counties. I also met with them early, within 72 hours of this decision being made at my constituency office. And probably more importantly, Mr. Speaker, I just want to point out for the record that I had a phone call discussion. The member from Mayor Mooney, the Mayor of Yarmouth, talked to me on Christmas Day. On Christmas Day, Mr. Speaker, and my job, I accept that, but I just want to highlight that. But there's an interesting side note, Mr. Speaker, that the members opposite talks about why that we may have not met with him. And I clearly showed that we have met a number of times, and my fellow colleagues have done the same. But the member from Argyle has failed to mention, Mr. Speaker, that they met with the Premier, with a delegation from the tri-counties, the mayors and wardens, and that the member from Argyle walked out of that meeting, Mr. Speaker. I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, that I know that we are having some difficult decisions in the next short term, and I will not walk away from them particular meetings. That's what the member from Southwest Nova Scotia is going to do. Mr. Speaker, it talks about, and I met with the different mayors and wardens from the tri-counties, and it talked about having the next step, about moving forward with a strategy to attracting tourism to Southwest Nova Scotia. And I raised a question, Mr. Speaker, that Sylvia Tyson is coming to Lockport this summer. And I raised that to make a point. I raised that to make a point, Mr. Speaker, is that if we're out there promoting tourism and bringing people to our communities, how many people knew that that particular singer were coming to Southwest Nova Scotia? And to me, it's something that we can do with our advertisement and promoting our area. And these are some of the strategies that we need to do to move forward. We need to sit down with our communities.
Order. Again, I'm going to remind members to give the Speaker respect as you were given respect. The Honourable Minister of Fisheries.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My honourable colleagues has made reference that we have met several times with the community. I continue to have an open door policy, whether it's Christmas Day or the weekend or whatever. And I believe that we have to come down with a strategy of making the right decisions for Nova Scotians, attracting people to our community. The member from Argyle is very aware that we have the Widgeport Tuna Festivals, promotion ideas like that, the Lockport Shark Scramble. There's all opportunities that we can bring people to our community, Mr. Speaker. Also, we have a transportation study. And I can assure you, Mr. Speaker, that there's going to be a commercial component to a ferry system, not to have a CAT. And to quote the member from the Liberal Party saying that not one person thinks that the CAT is the right decision. And when you continue, the previous government, Mr. Speaker, has pumped in over $21 million in the last 4 years. And the members opposite suggest that it's not the right decision. And I just want to close on this, Mr. Speaker. If I'm going to be in some turbulence or a rough setting, I want the person at the helm that's going to make the right decisions for the welfare of all Nova Scotians. And I spent a lifetime on the ocean, and I can assure you that I have that same confidence in our leader that I have when I'm facing that situation at sea. And we have to make the right decisions, and they're not easy. They are simply not easy. But to listen to the member opposite and say that no, that the CAT is not the right one for that area. So it comes back to making the right decisions. And I can assure you that we're with the community. Mr. Speaker, I can assure you and I can assure the members opposite that we are with that community. We want to move forward. We want to address how we can attract tourism to southwest Nova Scotia and all of Nova Scotia. We have been the leaders before. We are traded in our commercial products and will continue to do so. And it was very evident when we was in Boston this week that the trade, the commercial component of our trade, are very alive and well. What we're dealing with here, Mr. Speaker, is a decision that was made 3 or 4 years ago that the members of the opposite did not have the backbone to do. I can tell you that the members
Order, please. The honourable member of Fisheries, or Minister of Fisheries.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I can just close on this, Mr. Speaker. I can tell you that the members from southwest Nova Scotia, whether it's dealing with HS Fisheries, Shelburne Shipyards, or Bayside Home, that they feel the confidence that the right decision is going to be made, the right person is at the helm, and we are going to do this for Nova Scotians, and we are going to make the right decision for tourism. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. I'll now recognize the honourable member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to rise and say a few words in this emergency debate on the Cat Ferry out of Yarmouth. Before I begin, I want to acknowledge our special guests in the gallery that have traveled from southwestern Nova Scotia to be with us today. So again, to all our visitors, thank you for coming, and certainly welcome to our House of Assembly. Let me begin, Mr. Speaker. Just before this past Christmas, this new NDP government, these guys over there, Mr. Speaker, on December 15th, announced to Bay Ferries that they would no longer continue to subsidize the ferry service out of Yarmouth to Maine for the upcoming tourist season. Mr. Speaker, you can imagine this announcement was devastating. Was devastating news to the people working on the ferry and to their families. Mr. Speaker, this decision made by this new NDP government on December 15th certainly has created a lot of stir, a lot of talk, has raised a lot of question, has brought a lot of shock and a lot of anger in Yarmouth, in southwestern Nova Scotia, around Nova Scotia, and outside Nova Scotia. Yet, Mr. Speaker, there's still people out there that still believe there's going to be a ferry running out of Yarmouth this summer. Or usually the ferry starts in late May. So, Mr. Speaker, I can tell you, since December 15th, many people have been scratching their heads, trying to figure out why this new NDP government decided to make this terrible announcement a few days before Christmas. Many questions have been raised on who the government consulted with before making this decision. You know, why the government forgot, I presume, to consult with the tourism industry, why the government failed to consult with the Yarmouth Town Council, with the other municipalities in the southwestern region, why the government failed to consult with the local regional development authority, why the government didn't consult with the federal government, why the government forgot, I guess, to consult with anyone in our area, or yet, you know, why the government basically just did not consult with any stakeholders is certainly beyond my knowledge. So yet, Mr. Speaker, before going ahead and making this announcement, many people have been asking, was it well thought out? Was it well researched by the government? And I'll come back to the fallouts in a minute about this decision. Back in January 2009, in a press release, it was announced by the government of the day, and I will quote, "A joint federal-provincial study will examine the transportation needs in southwest Nova Scotia to determine long-term decisions about the Yarmouth to Maine service. The federal government has committed $1 million for this study." Now, so again, another question raised, why did the province not wait for this joint federal-provincial transportation study to be released before deciding not to continue to subsidize the Yarmouth Ferry? I understand, Mr. Speaker, back in December, just before Christmas, a draft copy of this report was available back then. So I'm trying to understand why the draft report was available back then, and still today, that study has yet to be released. So again, when people have been asking why the delay, I don't know why the delay. I know we have raised this again, and I'm sure in the coming days and weeks, we'll probably have an opportunity to question people on the front benches why there has still not been a report being released. Also, Mr. Speaker, the government, as I understand, decided to invest around $250,000 in this study. So the federal government invested about $1 million in this study. The province invested $250,000 in this study. But yet, they didn't wait a few months for this report before making a final decision on the future of the Yarmouth Ferry. And that's very difficult to understand. Why the province failed to wait until they had a copy, or maybe they do, I don't know, but yet back in December 15th, why they went ahead and told Bay Ferries, and then a few days later, then they made a formal announcement. So again, why the government did not wait to see a copy of this report before making this final decision. So again, maybe the government was not interested, Mr. Speaker, was not interested in seeing the results of this report. I can only jump to a conclusion. Maybe they know, maybe somebody knows. So I'm sure many people would love to hear why the government decided to jump ahead, make this decision before seeing a copy of this report. Now, let's go back. Back in December, when the government announced it would no longer continue to subsidize the ferry service out of Yarmouth, Bay Ferry announced right then that about 120 jobs would be lost. Phil Mooney, the mayor of Yarmouth, has said it very well, that the Cat Ferry is an economic generator that this community can't afford to lose. And he was certainly had it right down, nailed to the nitty-gritty. The Cat Ferry is an economic generator that the whole community of southwestern Nova Scotia can't afford to lose, let alone the rest of our province. The tourism industry, there's no doubt, will be taking a major hit, not just in southwestern Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker, but right throughout our province. Mayor Mooney indicated that he had learned that the Rod Colony Inn, the Rod Grand, had lost 1,000 rooms in cancellations, and also the hotels would be cutting about 85 jobs. Many tourism operators, hotel, motel, inns, bed and breakfast operators, restaurant owners, other businesses will certainly be severely affected as well. Mayor Mooney indicated that many jobs will be lost. In total, 500 jobs in the Yarmouth area would be lost. Staffing of the Yarmouth Custom Office, which currently has 19 positions, there's no doubt they will be affected as well. Staffing of the Nova Scotia Visitor Information Centre in Yarmouth, just when you get off the ferry. The Information Centre is there to welcome our visitors to our province. There's no doubt. Staff at the Visitor Centre in Yarmouth will no doubt be affected as well. Some businesses will most likely close, and we've heard of one, and probably more in the very near future. But we have to also remember when business close, there's no doubt that this will have an impact on banks, on credit unions, on financial institutions. And I know, speaking with the manager of the credit union in Clare, he has told me that they have a number of accounts that basically will depend on whether there is a ferry or no ferry. So again, when businesses close, it certainly also has a direct impact on the tax base of the town. And yet, this will certainly bring other concerns to the town council to address. So having no ferry in Yarmouth will mean less people coming to Yarmouth and less people coming to Nova Scotia to visit us. So with less people, there's no doubt going to be less money spent in Yarmouth and in our province. So the ripple effect is far-reaching, and I'm sure it will result in more job losses, Mr. Speaker. Everyone knows, pardon me, everyone knows that the town of Yarmouth will not be alone taking the hits from having no ferry running this year. Many communities throughout Nova Scotia will also be hit. Many of the tourists and buses getting off the ferry in Yarmouth, would travel to other parts of our province. Mr. Speaker, I was told recently by our parish at home in Church Point that has benefited from some of the bus doors coming off the ferry for many years. Last year, over 10,000 visitors toured our church, which certainly generated much needed additional revenue for our parish council to use to run our church. Furthermore, it helped us to hire 4 summer students. Well, this coming summer, I'm told that the committee is looking at hiring only 2 summer students. And they're actually considering not offering a guided tour of our church any longer. So when I look at the number of visitors, coming through our church this year, because there's no ferry running out of Yarmouth, the numbers will no doubt drop. As far as the revenue that the parish council had to work with last year and previous years, again, probably less money coming in. So again, our parish council will be faced, I'm sure, making some real tough decisions. So again, this is a direct spin-off from the ferry service out of Yarmouth. So when I'm talking to our parish council at home, if we had a chance to reach out to all parts of our province and hear some of these stories, I'm sure the list would be extremely long. And when I hear, we're looking at probably losing 500 jobs, hey, the final numbers aren't in. The final numbers aren't in. Again, Mr. Speaker, I'm sure this will have a ripple effect right throughout our province, and again, resulting in many job losses. So, Mr. Speaker, when you start adding up what we know now, the 500 jobs lost and probably more to come, the number of businesses that have closed and the number of businesses that will be affected, makes you wonder if this new NDP government made the right decision on December 15th. Mr. Speaker, obviously there are many people in our province that don't agree with this government decision. Yet, we have a decision in front of us, and we have to, what choices do we have? Many people have tried to convince the government to retract that decision, to sit down with the people involved, the stakeholders. It's not too late, but here we are, late March, with a ferry that was supposed to start late May. There's no possible way that can happen. So again, you really have to question in terms of what exactly happened here. I know, Mr. Speaker, my time is winding down, but I want to leave with this, because this has been brought to me time and time again. I'm sure, you've heard the government announcing millions to support various projects in the last few months. Certainly after the government made this announcement back in December 15, they've announced millions to support projects. They were good projects. But yet, you have to wonder, when the government said that we have to live within our means. Again, that raises another question. Does that mean that all parts of our province have to live within our means, or is that only applied to certain areas of our province? And I can tell you, Speaker, right now, the people of southwestern Nova Scotia, there's no question on their mind. If we have to live within our means, only applies to our people. So again, Mr. Speaker, there has been many questions that have been raised. I'm sure in the weeks coming forward, we'll have an opportunity to bring a number of these questions to the attention of the Premier and to various ministers. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I will take my seat. Thank you very much.
Thank you, member. I'll now recognize the honourable member for Hants West.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it's a pleasure to rise today and have a few minutes to speak on this very important issue. Again, this isn't an issue that's just about one area of this province. This issue affects everyone in this province and beyond, Mr. Speaker. The economics of this are phenomenal, and again, this wasn't thought out. We heard the other side talk today, the government speak about how this was the right decision, how there was leadership shown. I don't see any leadership being shown in this whatsoever. I'm quite confused by that. We're missing the leadership altogether. We're forgetting about the people in this province. We're supposed to be leading and helping, showing leadership for the people in this province. It's the people that we're supposed to be working for in this place. It's the people we're supposed to be caring about and making the right decisions, not only for today, but for the future of the people, our children, our grandchildren, and the children beyond that will make this province. The member yesterday spoke about we're only passing through here, how true that is. We want those people to stay in this province. We want those people to be in Yarmouth. We want them to be in Halifax. We want them to be in Cape Breton, Spring Hill. We want them to be in every part of this province. We want it to grow. We're not growing anything. We're not growing a thing. We're taking it away. We talk about people in this province. Yesterday's throne speech, it was interesting. I note there's initiatives here about learning for older, a targeted initiative for older workers. Well, that's great, because pretty soon that's all you're going to have left in this province. You won't have to worry about any initiatives for other people in this province, because all the young folks coming out of school are going to say, well, there's nothing in Yarmouth, there's nothing in Cape Breton, there's nothing in Spring Hill, because they're moving stuff out of there that was previously promised, I might mention. It's all gone. All we're going to have here, maybe a few farms. We've seen that go to, well, I can't say that word. We've seen that go away. Mr. Speaker, where's it going to end? We need leadership. There's no question about that, but we don't have it today. But it'll be back. We need not worry. It'll be back. It'll be back. These strategies we keep talking about, this government won't have to worry about those strategies ever being implemented. They won't be here. They'll be gone. They won't be here. Long term? Yeah. One term. One term is going to seem, oh, Mr. Speaker, it's going to seem like a long term because we're just getting started. It's going to seem like a very long term by the term it ends. And you'll probably be glad when it does. Mr. Speaker, It's about the people in this province. I know I was here in the last few years, quite fortunately, and I heard the current day government, when they were on this side, talk about the people, the people, the people. Strange how things have changed when they cross the floor over it. It's amazing how much has changed. And I'm not sure they have the picture, the real picture of what's going on for families in Nova Scotia. We talked about in the last campaign, and I believe the campaign before that, the slogan of this NDP government read, "A better deal for today's family." A better deal for today's family. Well, I can tell you what the people in Nova Scotia think today. The slogan probably should have read, "A bitter deal for today's family," because that's what it is. That's what the people of not only Yarmouth. This isn't just about Yarmouth. This is not just about Yarmouth. This affects every person in this province, Mr. Speaker. I had the opportunity last night to speak to a tourism operator. He owns the Meander Inn Bed and Breakfast in Windsor. And he was telling me, already, we know the numbers for our nights booked. People used to get off the ferry in Yarmouth. They'd make their way throughout the valley. They'd stop. They'd do the tourist thing. They'd leave their dollars here. And they'd be tired by the time they get 4, 5, 6 hours down to Windsor. So they'd pick up the phone and they'd book a night in Windsor. Well, that's going to affect restaurants, the B&Bs. John Briganti's saying, we don't know what we're going to do this year because that traffic's not going to be there. We may not even be in business this time next year because of the losses. They count on this, especially when the economics are tough. This little bit helps. We have to remember that, and the government, why are they refusing to meet with the people down? They say they have a plan. What's the plan? We're anxious to hear all about the plan. The Minister of Fisheries spoke about things, the fishing. I'm not sure where he was going. Fishing, ferry, people, fish. Tourism, no tourism. Water? Okay, well, there's water and there's a boat. Perhaps he should have kept his investment and not divested of it. He may need that again if things continue, Mr. Speaker. The Minister of Rural Economic Development, where is he on this issue? Where is he on this issue? Is he going to Yarmouth? Is there a plan coming in place before the ferry start in May? Don't think so. Now, this was an issue of $6 million, Mr. Speaker. $6 million was the issue. Now, $3 million we have to pay to do whatever it is we're going to do with this. It's gone. That's $3 million that's already there. That investment is actually guaranteed to be made. $3 million. Now, the municipal leaders and others said, well, we'll invest money as well. We'll come together. Would have been enough money if you combined it all. Poor leadership again. Exactly. Poor leadership. Short-sighted, knee-jerk reactions have been the philosophy of this NDP government. Unfortunately, this action is unfortunately, we're seeing hundreds of jobs gone. Where are those jobs going to come back to? We have seen jobs throughout Nova Scotia, Cape Breton, all the way to Yarmouth now, and throughout the valley, the farming community, jobs gone. Over 500 jobs, I believe, in the farming community throughout Kings County and the valley gone. The Minister of Service Nova Scotia is more than aware of that. So was the member for Kings North. These are hard times throughout the valley, and here we are again when there was an opportunity to invest a few $1 million and keep 500 jobs and more in families in Yarmouth and the spin-off and everything that goes with that, but they walked away from it. Why walk away from that investment in people? We would rather spend millions and millions and millions, tens of $1 million, as a matter of fact, to buy dirt. Well, it's great to be investing in the environment when the time is right, but if we were showing leadership, real leadership, what would we be investing in? We would be investing in Nova Scotians, Mr. Speaker. People. People in Yarmouth, people in Cape Breton, people in Halifax, people in Windsor, people in Kings County, all the way through. People along the South Shore, everybody's affected. Well, there's a question of, do we really care about the people or not? Because the people in Yarmouth are saying, we're walking away. Walking away. How can we trust a government that says, we're a better deal for today's families? No, it's a bitter deal. There's no question about that. They are bitter. They are indeed bitter. And I'm sure any member that's been down there knows just how bitter they are. And we talk about this upcoming ballot. It's going to be an exciting time in Yarmouth. There's no question about that. Mr. Speaker, it seems we have to do more to find jobs. And if that government has a plan, maybe there are plans, why are we not talking about it now? Why are we waiting any longer? There is no plan, or it appears there's no plan. If there is a plan, somebody should stand up over there and tell us about the plan. Don't just tell us in this House. Tell the people in Yarmouth. What is the plan? Give the people in Yarmouth some hope. But this government is not about giving people hope. This government is walking away from people. A bitter deal. They're throwing it all away. Now, yes, we have successful long-term business in Yarmouth. We need more. We need to keep growing the business in Yarmouth and Cape Breton and Halifax and Windsor and the South Shore, the Eastern Shore, Spring Hill, Cumberland counties. We need to continue. We have to continue to grow our economy. We talk about taxes, potential for raising taxes. Nobody argued it today. It almost appears as though that's coming. We talk about taxes. Taxes will not do anything to help Yarmouth. They won't do anything to help any part of this province from an economic standpoint. The Amherst member, I'm told, supporting that? Probably so. We talk to small business, big business, all business. This is about the economics. You don't grow the economy by raising taxes. You slow it. You slow it. And people may not, the economists are out there. We know. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We know what we have to do. This government has an opportunity to make it right in Yarmouth. They have an opportunity to invest in the people of this province. If it's not too late. If it's not too late, we think that we can still get to the table. Bay ferries, huge, it's important. But I heard comments here today about the government of Maine. Well, you know what? I can't imagine the government of Maine is worrying too much about jobs in Yarmouth, Nova Scotia. They're not. We need to worry. The Premier of this province, the government of this province needs to show leadership and worry about it. Don't worry about consulting with Maine. Consult with the people of Yarmouth. Consult with the people of Nova Scotia. That's what we need to do. But we have walked away from the people of Yarmouth. We've walked away from the people of Nova Scotia. We obviously don't care. The government, for some reason, again, we've heard the term platitude, hollow platitude, Mr. Speaker, because when the Premier said that he recognizes the issues in Yarmouth, Mr. Speaker, I don't believe that he does, nor do the people of Yarmouth. He won't, yes. When will the by-election be? We're all anxious for that by-election, Mr. Speaker. We're all anxious for that by-election. We need consultation with Bay Ferries. We need consultation. It may not be the right boat. It is the right route. It may not be the right boat, and nobody says that it is the right boat. We need to make investments in a boat, not a fishing boat. We need a tourist boat. We need to bring tourists to Nova Scotia. The spin-offs are incredible. $6 million for $175 million. If I was a gambling man, which I'm not, that's a heck of a good gamble, though. That's good in turn. That's good investment. Why can't you do the simple math on that side of the house? It's pretty easy over here. We could buy calculators and supply them. Yeah, we could go out and do that, no problem. Mr. Speaker, maybe you'd supply them through your office. That would be great, too. Let's start crunching the numbers. The next week is going to be interesting. Going to be interesting to see what the budgets, maybe there'll be surprises in there. I hope that they are. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I see that you're giving me my time is up, but I've enjoyed the opportunity to speak today. Remember, the people of Nova Scotia that are listening, this is a bitter deal for the people of Yarmouth, a bitter deal for Nova Scotians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member. I'll now recognize the honourable member for Lunenburg West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak on this very important issue. Obviously, if the issue could have been solved by loud talk or desk banging, it would have been solved this morning, but it is a very important issue, and it has to be discussed in a reasonable and rational way. And that's why, Mr. Speaker, I appreciated the words of the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, who talked about and acknowledged the fact that we are in tough economic times. And he also talked, and so did the Honourable Member from Clare, as I was listening thoughtfully to what I could hear from this side, about time. I heard many references to time. And as many people will know, there's a symbiotic relationship between time and money. And as time elapses and money's involved, as the time disappears, so does the money. So decisions have to be made, and they have to be made sometimes quickly, and they have to be made in a prudent manner, and that's what's been done. Mr. Speaker, there's a reasonably straightforward reason why the funding for the Cat Ferry has not been continued. Those reasons relate to a number of critical factors, and I think a lot of people know them, whether they admit it or not. One is ridership was consistently going down, while the cost of operating that ferry was consistently going up. And there were major changes, and somebody referred to them this morning. They were talking about changing tourism patterns. There were major changes in the way tourists were visiting our province. I believe the previous government could have signed possibly a longer-term deal with Bay Ferries had they been interested in doing that, but I believe they might have realized that it was a bad business case as well, and that's probably and prudently why they didn't do it. The business case, Mr. Speaker, also couldn't be made with other critical partners, and these critical partners, of course, include the state of Maine, which I I disagree with the member from Hants West. There has to be two terminuses when you have a ferry. It has to go from someplace to someplace, and so they were a critical element. They chose not to be interested, and the federal government did not yield many results either. Again, I would reiterate that I think the reason that didn't happen was because a good business case couldn't be presented that satisfied both of these parties. Our government is totally committed to working to resolve this issue in a thoughtful manner. This is by taking a good look at the comprehensive transportation study that's already cost different governments a substantial amount of money and would be ridiculous to ignore. In at least two speeches in this House, one last session and one in this session, I personally have attempted to explain that our approach to solving issues affecting all Nova Scotians, would be a thoughtful and reasoned one. Thoughtful and reasoned one. And this is why a thoughtful and reasoned approach is being taken with that soon-to-be-released study, rather than taking a scattershot or haphazard approach to this issue, resulting in throwing what I would describe as good money after bad. In his response to Her Honour's speech from the throne in this House this morning, and I was listening to it. Unfortunately, I had to leave the House for a second, but I saw it on television. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition talked about fostering economic growth in this province and making the correct decisions. I agree with the Honourable Member that this needs to be done, and that is exactly what we're doing. Mr. Speaker, the facts are that in the past 4 years, the province, through economic and rural development, tourism, culture and heritage, has pumped $20.15 million into this service to help cover operating costs. Mr. Speaker, that's a lot of taxpayers' money. The facts are that the service has been heavily affected by conditions that no one could necessarily have anticipated and are not the fault of Nova Scotians. Fluctuating U.S. dollar, rising gas prices, new passport requirements, which has been had a huge effect on all sorts of tourism, and changes in travel patterns. Ridership on both Bay Ferries Yarmouth to U.S. and the former Scotia Prince runs has decreased by 72% from 2001 to 2008, while the costs of operation have increased dramatically and consistently, I might add. Does such a scenario, we have to ask ourselves, as stewards of the people's money, present a good case for further subsidization? I have to believe that any reasonable-minded person who looks at the problem through a nonpartisan lens, and that should be the lens it's looked at, by the way, because it's affecting people's lives here, a nonpartisan lens, they have to say no. Given the province's economic situation, which again I thank the Leader of the Opposition, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, for talking about at least a little bit this morning, every expenditure is being scrutinized. I thought I covered that ground yesterday in my seconding of the motion on the speech from the throne, but since it appears in Hansard, and as a matter of the public record, I'm not going to repeat it here. In the case of Bay Ferries, it is clear that no amount of further subsidization would change the fact that the service is no longer commercially viable. And I did hear that today from some of the other parties. Everyone knows that successive governments in this province have put the province on an unsustainable financial path. And if we really care about Nova Scotians, we should be talking about that, because that's a very, very important fact. And this province is already facing, and I think most people know this, a $525 million deficit this year. We absolutely have to get the fiscal house of this province in order. And we, as the current government, and by that I mean all of us on both sides of this House, must ensure that this happens. To not make the hard and responsible decisions we must make will be courting disaster and guaranteeing that essential services like health care and education will suffer. To not address these issues means a giant backpack of debt for every young person who wants to have a future in our province, and we must not, and we cannot, and we will not let that happen. Nada. We are working hard to rectify this situation because we care deeply about the good people of southwestern Nova Scotia and the amazingly good people of Yarmouth County. Team Southwest has been established with federal and provincial partners to mobilize and discuss the issues and opportunities for helping Southwest Nova Scotia. Representation from Economic and Rural Development, Tourism, Culture and Heritage, along with the COA community partners, are exploring strategic opportunities to drive economic development and tourism in the region and to develop and employ real long-term sustainable solutions which will truly benefit all those in that beautiful part of the province. So, Mr. Speaker, I want absolutely...
Order, please. The honourable member from Lunenburg West has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, I want the good people of Yarmouth County and all Nova Scotians to know that they are of the utmost importance to this government, to every member on this side of the House, and that everything, absolutely everything that can possibly be done to make life better for the people in Yarmouth County and to make life better for every Nova Scotian will be employed by this government now and always. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member. I'll now recognize the honourable member from Preston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's with great pleasure I rise today to speak, and with great sadness to think that the community of Yarmouth and indeed Nova Scotia is losing a very valuable asset, and an asset that I think will have long-term devastating effect to our economy. Where the present government is talking about tax increases, and tax increases will also have another devastating effect on our economy as we move forward. And when you look at the fact that the Yarmouth Ferry had been there since 1847, that's a long time. The need is still there. I'm not convinced that perhaps the way that it was approached in the past was the best way to do it. I don't believe that the approach that the present NDP government has taken is the right approach either. I didn't see during the time that the Conservatives were in place really supporting tourism, really pushing tourism, really going into New England and other areas in the U.S. to make sure that ferry was utilized. I didn't see that happen. There didn't seem to be a real positive plan. Now, lo and behold, NDP government takes over, no plan again. And when you look at what's going to happen, and it's already started to happen in Yarmouth, you see businesses closing. Now, when a business closed, first on the surface you say, well, that's not too bad, you know, another one will start up and away we'll go again. That's not what happens. It takes a long time to establish a business. It's a big commitment by people. And not only is it a big commitment to start the business, it's a big commitment to make the business grow and prosper and indeed employ people and help our economy in the province. And we see some of these businesses close, have been there a long time with the experience and the dedication that people had and the financial commitment they've made, serious financial commitments, and you see this go down the drain all of a sudden. That doesn't come back. So this is going to have a very negative impact on long-term economy in the province. You talk about 189 immediate jobs lost as a result of the ferry going. That's one item, just one thing. And you look at the spin-off in the other areas, and they're estimating between 325 and 650 jobs gone. That's a lot of revenue that's gone from the province. Will that revenue also be spent in community services benefits? Let's hope not. Let's hope people can get jobs in the area. But having the second highest unemployment in the province in Yarmouth, I doubt that's going to be the case. I would say most people, as already been said here, will either have to leave the community or go on to some kind of social assistance or live a life that none of us want to live. So this is very, very serious. We've had other members here talk about how people come and visit the church, and one church was used as an example, but I'm sure that many churches and many other local organizations will see the same devastation. And as you go through this whole process and see what has happened and what could possibly happen and will happen, these things are real. This is not things that may be going to happen. These things are real. How can you justify not supporting the ferry in some manner? maybe different approach to things that have to be taken. I've always found over the years in business and indeed when I was a minister in the government, there's always several approaches to be taken on something. Sometimes the answers aren't obvious, but you've got to look for that answer. When you do find the answer, it usually works well for everybody. Unfortunately, the answer was in December, just cut the funding and away we go, and don't worry about anything else. You know, it was already said here today, and I totally agree, we need to invest in people. People are the most important asset we have in this province. We see our brightest, youngest minds going all over the country to create jobs for themselves and pursue careers. And I've said in this house before, I've traveled a lot all over the world, and almost everywhere you go, you see somebody sitting in that boardroom that's making key decisions in very influential and large companies that are from Nova Scotia. From Nova Scotia, think about that. And this is going to be another situation. We're going to see many of these bright people, business people possibly, that are going to close things down, move to somewhere else, and hopefully still in Nova Scotia, but probably not likely. After seeing this happen to them, their families being uprooted, their businesses being uprooted, and indeed not have the opportunities that they need in this province to ensure that we grow our economy. You know, there's rumors around that there's going to be tax increases here in the budget coming. Well, that's going to have a negative impact, very negative impact. But if you don't have any business people working, no good to put taxes up because nobody to pay it. So it'll just complicate itself. It's going to get more and more and more dire situation. And there was studies done, I remember in the early 90s, about a point where taxes become a negative input to the province. You can only take taxes so high. When you take them so high, after that, they decline. The income declines from it. And when the income declines, in the situation we're in today, wouldn't we won't have a $500 million deficit. We'll be in the billions and no way to pay it. So we've got to ensure that we work with people, work with communities, and ensure that we have people working in jobs that are productive, working in jobs that people can pay income tax, and people can put back in the community and do the things in the community that is so important for them to do. And if you don't set that environment up, if you don't create that environment, the whole economy is down the tubes. This will affect people in my area. It will affect people in Halifax. It will affect the people in Cape Breton. You take away from tourism, you get passengers coming across there. Last year, from what the numbers I have, is approximately 76,000 passengers. 76,000 passengers traveled in this ferry. Now think about that number. If you take 76,000 people, even if you divide that by two, roughly two, and come up to 38,000 people that might have traveled on that ferry that were from outside of Nova Scotia. You take 38,000 people out of that aren't coming to Nova Scotia this year, 38,000, and assume that they're going to spend $1,000 each. That's a lot of money, a lot of money. Probably spend more than that. There's probably more than 38,000 people. There's probably a lot more that travel on the ferry and affected by that. But you look at that, some of those people might be business people looking for business opportunities here, not even intending to do that, because I see that often is the case. People come to Nova Scotia, love it so much because it is a wonderful place to live, and they decide to bring their businesses here and employ people and work with people. That opportunity is gone. So when you look at opportunities and real opportunities for people in the province, it gets less and less and less. You couple this with tax increases that are being proposed, possibly income tax increases. We'll know when the budget's brought down, and all the other things that are going to factor in here. Everything accumulates, and all of a sudden you have a province that nobody wants to establish a business in. And we're very closely getting to that. Very, very soon we're going to be in that situation. And when you get in the situation, it's almost impossible to get out of it. I mean, this is not something that happens in a day or 2 days and some marvelous thing comes up by some government department is going to put $20 million into this or that. Well, number one, they won't have the $20 million anymore. And that somebody comes here and saves the province, we've seen that over and over again. People governments investing in huge companies that come, use our resources and our people, and sometimes take off with our people too, are good people, and really nothing positive comes to the province. This deal, I think, with Bay Ferries had to be reviewed. I don't think there's any argument about that, but there always is solutions. and there has to be solutions. And if you look at the economic impact, and economic impact's part of it, but look at the families it's going to destroy, and the hopes and the dreams that people had in the community, all in the area of the tourism. The immediate jobs are lost, and you see all of a sudden you had hope. Well, maybe you're going to build a new home in the community. So that's another job that's going to be lost because someone's not going to be able to work on the home. All those plans come to a grinding halt. And all of a sudden, you have an economy that all of a sudden you have a situation where people don't have hope. You take hope away, you've got nothing left. That's when people leave. They say, we can't stand this anymore, we can't put up with this anymore, and they're gone. And once they're gone, they don't come back. They do not come back. And if they don't come back, the economy suffers even more. So the whole thing compounds. And as it compounds, it gets worse and worse and worse. And you finally get to a point that although Yarmouth is a beautiful place, and southwest Nova Scotia is a wonderful place, and wonderful people, hard-working people, I will stress. I've spent a lot of time in the area dealing with people, business people, and residents in the area. It's an area I have a great deal of respect for the people and their initiative. If that hope is gone, those same people that had all those hopes and things that they could do to help the province, and I stress help the whole province, and help their community, that's going to be gone. And as that dies there, that is like a rotten apple in a barrel of apples. All of a sudden, the whole barrel is ruined. So we're headed in that direction. And if anyone over there is smiling and think I'm wrong, you wait and see. And hopefully I am wrong. Hopefully I am. But I don't think I am. And as time goes on, we're going to see this situation get worse and worse. We also had the Minister of, Acting Minister of Economic Development and Tourism say this is no time for political posturing. I agree. Hopefully you don't come at the last minute and save the ferry to get someone elected in Yarmouth. Thank you.
Thank you, member. That concludes our emergency debate time, and we'll be back in session on Monday at 7 p.m.
We don't want to go